Okay, everybody, it's time to talk about one of my favorite creatures, which belongs to the phylum Mollusca, or the mollusks. So let's get going. I'm pretty excited to talk to you about these guys. It's going to take a few days to get through all the different classes. This is a really big phylum. It's the second largest phylum on our planet next to the arthropods. So this picture you're seeing here is of one of the mollusks. This is a type of cuttlefish, which as you can see is closely related to squid. But mollusks include a lot of other animals that you're familiar with as well. So let's get going. Now, as far as which animals are included in this phylum, it includes the bivalves, which are the clams, the oysters, the mussels, the scallops. It also includes the gastropods, which are snails, slugs, and something called the nudibranch, which are beautiful. You've seen them before. They're really pretty animals. And then, of course, my favorite, the cephalopods, which are the octopus, the squid, and then something called the chambered nautilus, which is also a really freaking cool animal. So today we're mostly going to focus on some of the general characteristics of this phylum. Tomorrow's class we will focus on the bivalves and the gastropods, and then next week we'll start focusing on the cephalopods. So this phylum is referred to as what we call the soft-bodied invertebrates. And all members have a soft body, but most of them also have a hard shell that protects them. Not all, I said most, so there's definitely some exceptions to that. Like the animal that you're seeing here. This is a slug. You don't see an obvious hard shell on him. He does actually have an internal shell. Now this is a really diverse group of animals, of invertebrates specifically, so they don't have a backbone. So we have things like the scallop that you see in this picture here, the octopus, the snail. Some of these animals are stationary filter feeders, and some of these animals are super fast swimming predators like the squid. This phylum has over 112,000 different species. There's only one phylum on this planet that has more species, and that's the arthropods, phylum Arthropoda. Now, I want to remind you of some general characteristics that these guys have and compare them to some of the phylum that we've already talked about in the past. So, mollusks are coelomates. And remember what a coelomate is it's an animal that has a true coelom. So that's that open body cavity that's filled with fluid and it's completely lined with mesoderm. So a coelom, as a reminder, we had this on our last quiz, is a hollow fluid-filled body cavity that is completely lined with mesoderm tissue. This allows for more development of advanced organ systems, and all of these organ systems are suspended, so floating around in this coelom. Now, if we compare them to roundworms, phylum Nematoda, that we talked about in the past, roundworms, we call these guys pseudocoelomates, so fake or false coelomates, because they do have a body cavity, but their body cavity is only partially lined with mesoderm tissue. If we compare them to the flatworms, phylum Platyhelminthes, the flatworms, we call those guys acoelomates. And remember, anytime we add that letter A in the front of a science word, it means non or not, so this does not have a coelom. So they have no body cavity at all. They do have the full three germ layers, the mesoderm, the ectoderm, the endoderm, but they're all kind of squished on top of each other. And that's kind of what gives them their name, the flatworm. They're just all flat. They have no body cavity making them have a shape. Now, again, a reminder, there's some advantages to having a true coelom. So we've been studying the most primitive animals, and we're slowly going through the animal kingdom to the more complex animals. And so having a coelom is one of the major developmental features that allows for increased complexity. So having a true coelom, one of the advantages is the muscles of the body wall are separated from those of a gut. And what that means is that the muscles can actually work. They can contract without hindering, without stopping or interrupting the movement of food through the gut. It also, the coelom provides a space where the circulatory system can transport blood without interference from internal organs. And the gut and other internal organs are suspended from the body wall and are cushioned by that fluid that's found inside the coelom, and that includes in you and I. Now, if we look at the different phyla that have true coeloms, we've already looked at one of them, and that would be the annelids, the segmented worms. We just got done studying that. Mollusc, that we're just starting to talk about now, also have a true coelom. So do arthropods, phylum Arthropoda. So this is like the insects, millipedes, centipedes, spiders, crustaceans, which are like crabs and shrimp and lobsters. Those are all arthropods. Arthropod is the largest phylum on our planet. It has the most members, the most species of any of the phylums that we're going to look at. Also, phylum Echinodermata has a true coelom. The echinoderms or echinoderms, they are the sea urchins, something called sea slugs and sea apples, and then also something called a starfish that you guys are familiar with. Those guys are all echinoderms. And then phylum Chordata, the chordates, and this is the fancy science name for anything with a backbone. So this is reptiles and amphibians and birds and mammals. So what's interesting about the mollusk is they're the only coelomate, so they're the only animal with a coelom that does not have a segmented body. Okay, so annelids have segments, so do arthropods, so do echinoderms, and so do chordates. You might not look at yourself as having segments, but we'll talk about that when we get to that phylum. Now, another interesting thing, unique feature that you can find in phylum Mollusca, and also phylum Annelida, the phylum that we just got done talking about, is the specific type of larvae form that they have called a trochophore. And this is a larval stage of development. And it's a common feature that's shared by most, so that means there's exceptions. It's shared by most aquatic mollusks and annelids. So remember that word aquatic means it lives in the water. So the trochophore hatches from an egg and is a free swimming larvae. It has cilia that's used for movement and for drawing food into its mouth. Here's a picture of that cilia. These little hair-like structures also appear on the anterior end, and you can see this electron micrograph picture of a trochophore larva here with the cilia. Okay, so to use those cilia both for movement and also creating a current, kind of like sponges do, to bring food into its mouth. Now, trochophores, they're carried on the ocean currents, and this helps with the dispersal of their species. And we haven't really talked about this. This is a concept that you probably learned about in biology. But when parents have babies, they don't want to compete for resources with their babies, with those larvae, with those offspring. And so clams and oysters and cephalopods, all these guys, they don't want to compete. They don't want to add a bunch of population to the area that they're living in, because then they're going to have to compete for food and space and shelter. So having the young being dispersed, being moved around the ocean to a different place, reduces competition with their parents, which is a good thing. Now, since the trochophore larvae is found both in mollusks and also in annelid, this suggests that they have probably evolved, these two groups, these two phylums have probably evolved from a common ancestor. Now, other characteristics that mollusks have is they have bilateral symmetry, and so remember that means two-sided shape. And remember that organisms with bilateral symmetry have a right and a left side. And there's only one way that you can divide this animal and get two equal sides, and the red line there is showing you that one way. So if I was to try to divide the animal in this direction, those two sides would not be equal. They would not look alike. In this direction, in any other direction, there's just one. So they show bilateral symmetry compared to like the jellyfish. The cnidarians that we studied had radial symmetry, and the sponges didn't have any kind of symmetry. They had asymmetry. Now, if we look at their general body plan, first of all, in general, mollusks have three regions. They have the head, and the head contains the mouth and the sensory organs, so cephalization. And they have something also called a foot, which is a large muscular organ that it uses for movement. That word locomotion means movement. Even octopus have a foot. Now you might think, like you look at this picture here and you see these 8 tentacles. These 8 tentacles are part of one foot. That one foot is divided into 8 tentacles. A third part of their body plan, and the foot on the snail is this piece here that it uses to slime itself around. So they also have something that we call the visceral mass, and the visceral mass contains all of the internal organs. This is a picture of a bivalve's visceral mass. You guys eat the visceral mass if you're eating like clam chowder, if you're eating mussels or clams or oysters. And then, since the mollusks have a true coelom, all their organ systems are well developed. So that's an advantage of having that true coelom. Now, the mollusk also has a special body part called the mantle. And the mantle, what it is it's a layer of epidermal tissue. So epi means on the outside, that covers the visceral mass. And in most mollusks, and I say most because there's exceptions, like the octopus is an exception to what I'm about to say, and so are squids. But in most mollusks, the mantle secretes. That means it leaks out. You secrete sweat out of your body. So the mantle secretes one or more hard shells, and the shells are composed of a substance called calcium carbonate. You've heard that substance before. It's the same substance that corals use to make the structure that their polyps grow in. So coral reefs are made out of calcium carbonate as well. Now, the mollusk shell protects the soft body of the mollusk. That makes sense. And there are some disadvantages to having a shell, and there's some advantages as well. So the disadvantage is that it reduces the surface area of this animal that's available for gas exchange, to exchange gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide. So remember, a lot of these animals that we've studied so far use diffusion to get oxygen into the body. And so the bigger surface area they have, the more diffusion they can do, the more oxygen they can get into them. So having that shell stops that from being able to happen. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about their respiration. It's a little bit more complex than what we've been studying. And how they get around this. So instead of relying on diffusion to do this, they have evolved gills, okay, which we'll talk about here quickly. So the gills allow them to get more oxygen without using diffusion, which allows them to keep this shell, which gives them a lot of protection, obviously. So let's look at those gills more specifically. Now, gills are specialized for the exchange of gases. Don't let that phrase intimidate you, exchange of gases. That just means you're exchanging oxygen for carbon dioxide. You're breathing in oxygen, you're breathing out carbon dioxide. That's exchanging of gases. Gills have a really large surface area, which is important because the bigger the surface area, the more oxygen it can get. And this large surface area is in contact with a really rich supply of blood vessels. Oxygen from the water diffuses into the blood vessels of the gills. Carbon dioxide in the blood diffuses across the surface of the gills into the external environment, so away from the animal. So aquatic mollusks possess gills, so ones that live in the water. Land-dwelling mollusks, like garden snails that you probably have around your house, do not have gills or lungs. So the land-dwelling mollusks, oxygen diffuses across a thin, moist membrane and enters the body via diffusion. So this is another animal, the land mollusk. They can't dry out, just like the annelids, just like the segmented worms that we just studied. Now, mollusks also have a fairly complex nervous system compared to everything else that we've studied, especially once we get to the cephalopods, once we get to the squids and the octopus and the nautilus. So, with their nervous system, they have something called ganglia, and these ganglia is like a bundle of nerves that serves as a primitive brain. These ganglia, they're connected by two pairs of nerve cords so that information can move from their brain-like structure to the rest of their body to respond to their environment quicker. The ganglia and nerve cords control muscles involved in movement and feeding. So again, this allows for much more rapid response to stimulus in their environment. The nervous system allows the mollusk to respond to simple stimuli such as light, touch, chemicals, and the environment. And again, it's a bit more complex in the cephalopods, which we'll talk about a little later. Now, another unique feature of a mollusk is this really interesting mouth part that they have called a radula. And there's a picture of it right here. This is a picture of the underside of a snail. And this right here is a close-up picture of the radula. Now, the radula is the main feeding adaptation in many mollusks, not all. It's flexible and tongue-like, and it has like abrasive teeth all over it that point backwards. So here's the teeth right here. This would be like the front of the animal right here. So these teeth are all facing backwards. You can kind of see them lined right here. And it uses these to either cut food or to scrape food from a surface. And I have a little video quick that I'll show you that shows kind of the radula in action. Octopus and squid have these. They work a little bit different than what you're going to see on this snail. And again, I'll address that when I talk about cephalopods. So let's look at this, the radula. This is kind of mesmerizing. This is a snail. Okay, and then this right here that you see is the radula. So it has those backward facing teeth. It's using it to scrape algae off of the glass of this aquarium is what it's doing. So it's using it as a scraping motion. Pretty cool. It's almost better than a lava lamp. Okay. Now, this is kind of like a nice summary slide. If you're having a hard time or if I was going a little bit too fast, these are like the 6 characteristics that are found in this phylum. And do remember there are some exceptions to some of these. So they all have a coelom in phylum Mollusca. They all have bilateral symmetry. They all have a body plan that includes these 3 parts, a head, a foot, and a visceral mass. They all have complete organ systems compared to what we've been studying. We've seen some with organ systems that are not quite fully developed yet. They have a shell. There's some exceptions to that one. The octopus and squid are an exception. And then they have that special mouth part that I just showed you, a radula. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. Next class we're going to talk about bivalves and gastropods, and that would be tomorrow. Okay, peace out.